My wife had the idea and suggested I make our son his first cute little toolbox for Christmas. I don't know about the cute part, but it did sound like a fun, quick project. I have these chunks of white oak left over from building his other furniture, which you guys have been loving and are my most popular plans by far, so be sure to check out those videos and plans if you haven't yet. But it's cool to be able to use these pieces up here and be an exact match to the rest. Obviously, these pieces would make for one thick and heavy toolbox, so after flattening one face and squaring up an edge, I was really excited for this next step. I got this Laguna 14BX bandsaw a while ago and have used it in a couple videos just real quick, but haven't really pointed it out yet. I've actually had my eye on the Laguna 1412 bandsaw for years now. For my business, there's just been more important upgrades that had to happen first. But as impressed as I've been with my Laguna joiner and planer, that solidified this decision, besides stepping it up to the 14BX. I think the capacities are the same. This model is just a heavier and thicker one-piece solid frame, has a foot brake, and you can pick between a 110 volt 1 3/4 horsepower motor or a 220 volt 2.5 horsepower motor, which is what I went with. I had the space electrical wise, so might as well go big. But this right here is why I've been wanting this. Being able to resaw materials efficiently is just something I wasn't equipped to do. I have the 3/4 inch Resaw King blade on here, and it's just so effortless it's crazy. Left a really nice cut for being such an aggressive blade too. Splitting the boards in half did release some tension and cause them to bow, so next it was back to the joiner to reflatten and then the planer. I'm not taking these down to final thickness yet though, since I have a couple panels to glue up. These pieces are skinnier than I'd like for the taller end pieces, and I'd much rather the wood grain all flow the same direction around the box anyway. So I needed to go ahead and glue the pieces together horizontally. One panel to get both of the end pieces out of, and then the second panel is for the bottom of the box. And yes, I realize these are a lot of steps and unnecessary work for such a simple project, but that's alright, we're just having fun with this one. Now with the panels dry, I could finish taking everything down to final thickness. I went with 5/8 of an inch here, more substantial than a 1/2 inch, but not quite as heavy and bulky as 3/4. With the pieces cut to final size and the wood grain beautifully flowing the same direction, I could get them joined together. And something like this just calls for some great looking box joints. So first we need to make a simple jig. I'm using a dado stack here set up to cut a 1/2 inch wide and setting it just a hair taller than my material. With the blade set, the first step is just taking a scrap piece of wood that'll be attached to the miter gauge and making a pass through. Next we need to fill that notch with a little peg the exact same size, which in this case is the 1/2 inch wide and 5/8 inch tall. I have a long piece here, which is important, but for the actual peg I can go ahead and cut it shorter. And here I'm slightly chamfering the top edges of the peg. This just helps slide the actual material on it easier while cutting. Now I can go ahead and get it glued into the notch. It's important that the peg is either perfectly flush with the back fence on the bottom, or even a little short is okay. You just don't want it protruding out past the bottom edge at all. And I'm making sure to clean off all the glue squeeze out as well. Back to it being important that I had extra of that material, I'm going to take the rest of it and place it between the blade and the peg to finish setting the jig right where it needs to be on the miter gauge. And that's it. I did give the glue some time to dry, but besides that, we have a super simple jig in just a few minutes and we're ready to start cutting the pieces. I cut both ends of the two long sides of the box first. And you'll see the first pass I make is with the material just butted tight up to the peg. Then it's just a matter of sliding the notch I just cut over onto the peg and making the rest. Now for the mating notches on the two end panels. I'm taking one of the sides and placing it onto the jig to butt the end panel up tight to for the first pass. Then it's just more of the same, except these don't go all the way up, so I'm definitely making sure I don't cut more than I need to. That would stink. Time for a dry fit, and man, that's just satisfying. Up next was cutting a groove in all four pieces for the bottom panel to sit in with a 1/4 inch straight bit on the router. On the two end pieces I could just run them straight through since the box joints from the side pieces would hide the groove on the end. But for the sides I needed to do a drop cut. I started and stopped the groove about a 1/4 inch from each end. Since the ends of these joints are exposed, this way there's not a big hole in our joints that we have to worry about trying to fill. Now for the bottom panel. I made this a 1/2 inch thick, so here I'm making a rabbit cut on all four sides to create a 1/4 inch tongue that slides in those grooves in the other pieces. Up next was trimming up the two end panels a bit and drilling holes for the handle to sit in. I'm using a 7/8 oak dowel rod for the handle, which I thought looked best proportionally and still easy for a kid to carry. I do wish I would have tried to make my own handle so the color matched better, but it looks pretty good once the finish is on. All that's left to do is glue it all together. I did go ahead and sand and tape off the inside edges first. These make for a pretty messy glue up, and the tape eliminates a whole lot of cleanup work later on those tough inside edges. I'm also putting these space balls inside the groove for the bottom panel. It's not a very big piece, so it won't move a ton, but since it is solid wood, it'll expand and contract with the seasons, and these little balls just take up the space so the panel can't rattle around. There's a ton of glue surface here which makes these joints really strong, but it is time consuming. So, while I do that, it would be a great time for you to go ahead and give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Drop a comment down below too. I really appreciate all of you watching, and these are all great ways to help the channel grow. Unfortunately, as I was pounding this thing together, I made my camera tilt down and didn't realize it. But nonetheless, I got her all clamped up to dry. I don't typically record me sanding because that's boring, but remember back to when I set the table saw blade just a tad higher than my material to cut these joints? The result of that is these fingers sticking out just a little proud. It's better for them to be a little long rather than too short and the joints not fully coming together. This is kind of the ideal amount here to get them quickly sanded down flush. Last but not least is applying some finish. And just like the rest of his furniture, I have some Rubio Monocoat in the color Natural to use up. I just rubbed it on with an old t-shirt, buffed it in with a white Scotch-Brite pad, and then wiped off the excess. I probably said it in all the other videos, but the camera truly doesn't do it justice on how good this color looks on white oak. This may stay looking good sitting on a shelf in his room, or it may be outside full of rocks and dirt next summer, and we'll really get to see how durable this finish is. We shall see. Really, this was only a couple hours worth of work, just spread over 3 days because of the steps I chose to do. But this was a fun project for me that I really enjoyed, and hopefully you guys liked watching the process. Until next time, take care.